Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're listening and watching us from. I'm Rafael Gonçalves, Communications Coordinator for KoreConnect. And this is the 18th edition of Core Talks. This is actually the first show in 2023. And just right now, we have reached 9,500 followers on LinkedIn. So hopefully, we're going to 10K pretty soon. Today, I'm with Peter Danico, our CRO. Peter, please introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, and welcome everybody to the show today. It is 2023. I'm Peter Danico, the CRO over at KoreTalkX, and for the next 40 minutes or next 45 minutes to an hour or so, we want to talk a little bit about, or I guess a lot about, is what's new for 2023, what's going on in the markets, and most importantly, what KoreTalkX is doing. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Raphael, and you can give us some insights as to, or give me the overview. Throw the questions at me. Let's have a get together and have a chat here.
Sure, sure. And 2023 is about to start. It has already started, of course. Today is Friday the 13th. Some people believe it's bad luck. I have no problems with Friday the 13th. I actually like the 13th. I actually like this number. When I played soccer, I used to like the 13. My number was 13. Uh, but we have a lot of news, a lot of new things on CoreConnect, a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about online investment today and our passport for online investment. KoreID is we're bringing a new product, KoreID, which will help remove a lot of friction and will make the online experience for investments way better for everyone, right? For issuers, for investors, for any participant at all. So we'd like to start. We found this private securities 22-23 survey that was conducted by the World Digital Foundation in association with Crowdfunding Insider, and we have very interesting data on the private capital markets that are probably interesting to contextualize what we're talking about. 2,500,000 people were surveyed, and 86% of these respondents said they were confident or extremely confident about the private securities market for 2023. So it's a huge number. It's a huge number and a very positive landscape. So can you say that the capital market, Peter, is being largely democratized already?
Um, well, without a doubt. I mean, the stat that you just looked at, and I'm looking down at some documentation. So you've got 250,000 surveyed, 70,000 from private companies, investors, retail, accredited investors, another 100,000 made up this survey, and 80,000 industry professionals that were engaged in private securities were all part of this. So when you say that, 86% of the respondents said they were confident, extremely confident about the private securities market for 2023. It says that there's an awareness out there that has, you know, really emerged over the last 10 years. Every day we're talking to private companies that are looking at the alternatives to raise capital, and they're always asking why now. What's happened in the last couple of years. So I think it's important to give a little quick recap of this journey as we dovetail into what Core Connects is doing for 2023. As you touched on things like, we've got Core ID, we've got Core ID Verified, we've got Core App, and all of these things that we're bringing to the foreground is really part of a convergence. When I say a convergence, it was a 10-year journey for our founders, and that journey really brings together technology, regulations, and consumer adoption. And that's why some of these numbers that you're starting to see when we say 86% of respondents said they're interested in the marketplace, but it's still really, really early on. So let's take a step backwards for a second and say crowdfunding, and that's the term that's been used for a long, long time. I think we're emerging into 2023 where it's not really the term crowdfunding so much now. It's really capital formation. And I like to think that the CF kind of relates to that. It's capital formation from individual participants, the public at large. You mentioned democratization of capital. We hear that word a lot, and as more and more individual participants become aware of private capital markets through capital formation, through Regulation CF, through Regulation A, um, it just tends to spawn more and more individuals to want to participate. But it all starts with that awareness. So if we go back 10 years ago, well, 10 years ago plus, when the exemptions were formed to, bring on, quote, democratization of capital. What happened over the last 8 years that it took this long to come to fruition? Well, one of the things that existed was there was a tremendous amount of friction points. Um, so one was the friction points. Technology really wasn't there. How are you going to manage tens of thousands, if not hundred thousands, of individuals on in private companies from a cap table perspective? Too onerous a task. And we're going to touch on a lot of those things on how that's evolved and
Yeah,
changed.
sure.
Um, Raf, one of the other things that, okay, so you got a technology friction, it took 8 years, but you also had a market awareness, from a consumer perspective. We had COVID had occurred, and a lot more people were sitting at home. So you kind of have this perfect storm or this evolution. Companies became, in the early stages, they thought, crowdfunding was all about Kickstarter, I'm going to, and they had their place and they still have their place.
Hmm.
Small companies, individuals, they say, hey, if you want to invest in my company, I'm going to give you, some product that I might be manufacturing as an example. But it's come a lot further than that. But as it comes a lot further, it's really complicated. And over here at KoreConnect, we found that every day you have to realize that there's a lot of intermediaries involved. So I think it's real important for us to start and look at, you know, what's the difference in a private capital raise than anything else is you have a lot of, intermediaries. It's a very highly regulated environment. So you've got an ecosystem, and it takes a team to do a capital raise, to even share your offering, to share um, your information on your company to the public at large, let alone get them to invest. So when I talk about those intermediaries, what does that really mean? So what does it
Hmm.
take to raise the capital? If we look at it that way, then we can talk about what's new for 2023. So, I'm an issuer. I want to raise capital. I need to have a transfer agent. What's a transfer agent do?
Hmm.
Transfer agent is managing my securities. What does that even mean? There's thousands of transfer agents out there. Broker dealers. Geez, what does a broker dealer do? I need a broker dealer. This is a regulated, entity, for example. So I need escrow providers. I need banking rail providers. There's all these different disparate pieces that need to come together for a raise. So too many people think that I say too many, or a lot of people, even myself a long time ago, was a little confused. I just thought, hey, I can go online, and why can't I buy something and potentially invest in a company from a securities perspective? And that investment is as simple as me buying a shirt. Well, that
Hmm.
transaction isn't really quite that simple, Raf. I mean, when it comes
Hmm.
to the security world, and because of these regulations and because of these intermediaries that exist, they all have a purpose. By the way, because of those, though, there's friction points that occur, and it's not as easy as you think. So over the last 8 years, these friction points start to get removed. They start to continually to get mitigated and become removed. So imagine, if you will, I'll make a good analogy to say,
Yeah,
you know,
security takes complexity, right?
it's very complex. Let's take a simple overnight thing that nobody knew about 10 years ago, or our small audience did, when we look at things like Bitcoin. Bitcoin comes out, and all of a sudden, wow, everybody knows about Bitcoin over the last few years, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it took 10, 15 plus years for people to understand it. The ability to transact, or the ability to engage with, let's say, Bitcoin in that space. Again, we're going to dovetail away from that, but it was an awareness and adoption curve that took a long time. Then all of a sudden, overnight, we're seeing that, and in the from the private investor, the awareness is still really early in the game. Some people say, hey, the stadium's just being built. Other people say, hey, we're on first base. It's the early stages. But when you start to look at 86% of all respondents say they're confident or extremely confident in the survey that just came out, the awareness is just starting. So
Hmm.
if the awareness is starting and companies are raising capital, and in this particular example, I think there was 80,000 companies that are interested in raising capital through the private marketplace as we speak.
Yes.
Um, First thing that comes in, how do I do this? So when they're looking at how do I do this, I mentioned things like the intermediaries. So if we understand the connect the dots and we compare it to, let's say, an e-commerce transaction and from a parallel. So in an e-commerce transaction, as I said earlier, I put my credit card on, I buy my shirt, and I hopefully I'm going to get my goods. But I change my mind. Okay. I can cancel that transaction, the shirt goes back, and my credit
Hmm.
card gets refunded. When we start to talk in the securities world, it's a whole different game. Depending on the exemptions, for example, difference between a Reg CF and a Reg A. Um, it's not just a case of me investing with my credit card or investing with my wire transfer, or doing an ACH transaction. When I make that purchase, it doesn't operate the same way. I have to go through a series of intermediaries. So let's say, for example, the intermediaries, I I go online, I press a button, I'm making an investment, and I'm going to fill out this form. And that form is going to ask me a series of questions. It's going to ask me a lot more questions than I might have to do when I'm making that purchase for my shirt, for example. And those questions might be things like, geez, I'm asking you my social security number. Why am I asking my social security number? That's a sensitive bit of information, but that's also a friction point to that investor. Whoa, wait a sec. You're asking my social security number. You're asking my birth date. Well, this is a regulated environment, Raphael. So when that information is being asked from that investor, it's for a purpose for the various intermediaries that are there to protect the investor, protect the issuer in a compliant manner. So
Hmm.
who's asking for that information? Well, the broker dealer has a really big role in this part. So I give my credit card, I put my money in, and those funds have to go somewhere. Well, they're not going to the issuer or the company that's raising funds right now in their fundraise. Those funds have to go somewhere first. They're going to go into escrow. So, what happens when you go to escrow? They're going to sit there. And that's historically the big black bag. And one of the challenges when transactions are occurring is, okay, I've got investors investing in my company using credit card, ACH, wire transfer, various amounts, and they're all going to escrow. But most companies today might think that escrow, and even the financial institutions, think that escrow is escrow for, it's the same across the board. But if I'm dealing with small regional bank, for example, and they say we facilitate escrow, how come I can't let me do escrow for your securities offering? Um, that transaction is dramatically different in the infrastructure that those companies have. That, let's say, the bank in this case, um, isn't really necessarily set up to handle securities. Okay, I'm they may be used to more like a real estate transaction. Real estate transaction. I've got my broker. I've got my lawyer. I've got $50,000 going from A to B. We're manually doing a bunch of paperwork. That paperwork goes back and forth. We sign off, we approve it, we close it. Those funds get released and go from party A to B. Okay, sounds pretty simple. It's something that we're familiar with. But when we
Hmm.
start to look at the complexity of a securities transaction, just for this one piece, let alone the other areas, let's take a look at what happens. So now 10,000 investors, 50,000 investors, 100,000 investors. And that's what we experience today, Raf. Like, we've got
Hmm.
hundreds of accounts. They have tens of thousands of investors in a private company. Those investors made their commitments through a variety of different payment instruments, such as credit
Hmm.
card, ACH, wire transfer. They're all going into escrow. And we've learned the hard way. I mean, we've learned over 10 years that, KoreConnect has learned that, wow, escrow isn't the same thing. So, and part of that is, let's suppose I make a transaction and and I'm using my credit card. Well, the regulations say that it's going to go to escrow, but I'm not even going to take it from you yet. So I'm an investor. I've made a commitment. I think I've made an investment, but it's kind of sitting in a little bit of limbo here for a minute because there's something else. There's another participant here, another intermediary. What's that intermediary? That's the broker dealer. The broker dealer is that regulated body. That regulated body and that broker dealer now has to do their job. Their job is to do KYC, know your customer, ID verification, anti-money laundering. So even
Yeah,
before the
online investing is very, it's very, I mean, it's very easy to hide yourself behind an online investment, right? That's why you have this security issues with KYC and AML.
exactly. I mean, I'm doing this transaction. So all of a sudden I thought that, okay, as an investor, and this is the friction points we're going to talk about, I just thought I put some information, but you're asking me a lot of personal information. So I need trust and confidence in that. And hence 2023 will be this year of, trust and compliance. So let's backtrack for a set. So I know these funds are going somewhere, and intermediaries such as the broker dealer, they have to do their job. And historically, there's no way that they're going to do KYC, ID, and anti-money laundering verification on 10,000 investors that are all investing $1,000. So hence technology, fast forward. Technology is taking away the friction point to make it easier for the broker dealer. But the broker dealer still becomes this insurance policy for the issuer to say, we want to protect the investors. So we're going to take advantage of these exemptions. I've got tens of thousands of investors, hundreds of thousands of investors, but I'm going to do my job as the broker dealer. I need to do it quickly, fast, and easily. Okay. So the broker dealer, however, they're going, okay, I'm going to do these, my compliance. I'm going to do large volumes of small transaction. Technologies exist to help me do that. And what does that technology look like? So we're going to talk a little bit today about things like permission blockchain. What is a permission blockchain? Well, I think in our past sessions, we've had Dr. Karan Garamala, we've had Oscar Joffrey,
Yes.
we had these folks all talking about, the nuances of what a blockchain, and we had a great session last week with permission blockchain versus public blockchain. So in this particular case, blockchains are simply taking a lot of friction out. It's going to make things really, really efficient. Okay. So if the broker
technology
deal,
is about making things efficient, right?
it is, but if I've got these efficiencies and I've got these rules and these disparate intermediaries, how do I connect them all together? That's been the challenge. Okay. The reason I brought up, escrow, for example, if we tried to connect to every bank that was out there and say, hey, you provide escrow, let's get into the securities world, it doesn't work. The reason is they've got a lot of legacy systems. They have infrastructure and they don't understand the regulations, to be quite frank with you, because they're used to doing transactions for what they know. Like any of us, we live in the worlds of what we know and we transact accordingly. So now these funds have come in, they're sitting there in limbo. The KYC is being authorized. I can access those funds, but I still haven't bought my security. Those funds are now going to go to escrow. So they're going to sit into escrow. So how do I reconcile that transaction when it comes to escrow? So I was absolutely aghast when I got into this industry. I just thought, man, everything's connected. I'm a Canadian. We got 5 big banks, and it was easy. I just transfer money in my email and I move money around here and there. It doesn't quite happen because when you have lots of intermediaries, it's not that simple. Funds are going into escrow, but they have to come out of escrow. So let me paint a picture here for you. And the reason I'm wanting to go over the complexities is so that all of our audience and all of our participants start to think, wait a sec here, there's a lot of dots to connect here between these parties, and these parties all have an absolutely valuable role. Okay. Now, the investor doesn't need to know what's going on behind the scenes. They just want to know that I made my transaction. But we sure as heck better be able to communicate with those investors along their investment journey, because otherwise they're going to just fall off. You're going to lose the adoption. They're going to lose trust. because of all these compliance and regulatory requirements, because they're not informed of what that really means. So we're doing escrow again. I'll continue my little narrative on escrow. So now KYC, ID, AML has been done. Those funds are going to come out of escrow. Oh, but wait a minute here. I had a minimum in my offering that says if I didn't raise, let's say $200,000, we wouldn't close. So we're going to give all the money back to these individuals. Okay, this is a simple exercise. Not quite the same as if I'm giving back my shirt and my credit card gets refunded. I've now got 10,000 individuals that all had different types of transaction with different types of payments and escrow. What if I didn't have an ID associated with those funds going in back to the individual? And believe it or not, that's pretty much the norm of the technology up until fairly recently. There was no identification down to the individual going in to reconcile it coming out. So the reconciliation process was extremely onerous. Great, now I got to give $200,000 back to 10,000 different investors in all different amounts, and they all paid differently. And then I have to subtract the various fees that are associated with that. Wow.
Yeah, being unidentified on the web not very long ago was safer, was considered the safe way to navigate, right?
Yeah, I mean, safer way to navigate. But now I want to navigate safely, but give you information about me so that I can transact with you in the case of we're in the securities world. But if I have a lot of friction points along the way, and this is where blockchain comes into the picture, then I have to do a lot of manual processes in the back room. So when I talk about I'm a regional bank, and I'm not set up to transact this way. Remember, I might be used to just saying, give me $10,000. $10,000 comes out. It's a party of three, and away we go. Increase that volume exponentially and deal with small micro payments. Okay. It becomes really, really, really difficult. So one of the things that we're real excited about this year on the KoreID, and not to do a commercial, I think it's important that everybody understands that, why these things are occurring, but how these problems are being solved. And this is the exciting part. So imagine now, if I put an ID or a tag or a token that's going to identify the individual, but also protect the individual, right? They make their investment. Funds are going into escrow. Funds are coming out to escrow. The broker dealer is going to release those funds so the issuer gets them. The transfer agent on the back end, they need to know that those funds are approved so the issuer can update the cap table specific to those individual companies, right? So now you got all these things being connected. But wait a sec, I'm an investor. I don't want my credit card to be known by one central agency per se. This becomes even trickier. So you need to be able to do things, and this is where the technology comes into play. I'm going to identify you as an individual, but I'm not going to keep your credit card information because that's not what I want to do. So a lot of people might think, even companies like KoreConnect, we keep all of this stuff. No, we don't. We don't keep any of that stuff. We're just IDing and tagging information so all the participants can do their job. And we're only keeping the information depending on, well, we're not keeping any information. The SEC registered transfer agent will have things like, I want to know how you transacted. Hey, you bought it with a credit card. Not keeping your credit card information. Oh, you transacted on this date. The debt or equity instrument that you purchased. Oh, Peter, you've got voting rights. There's a hold period on the particular security. All this is visible to not only the company, the investor. The investor before, we were used to having certificates, putting in, I'm going to date myself, filing cabinets. I never had any communication. I'm going, what's this old cert? So now we're fast forward. So we're fast forward going, well, wait a sec. I see what my transaction was. It's on a blockchain. It's an immutable ledger. That comment that we made earlier, you asked about difference between public and a permission blockchain. Well, if you think about it this way, a permission blockchain has all these intermediaries intertwined to it. They're all doing what they're supposed to be doing, except we have a ledger of that transaction. and the
Hmm.
stored data is just, it's not stored with one entity, one party. So it protects that individual. It said, I'm going to transact here, we're going to make this transaction over there, but everybody can do their job in the network. So certainly the blockchain, a permission blockchain, helps address with multiple intermediaries and regulatory requirements. Okay.
Hmm.
And funds are kind of moving around, but they're, again, they have to be moving around associated with the rules. When we talk about a public chain, we're really dealing with unverified participants. You've got a central point of failure potentially. And that doesn't mean that every public chain can't do this. However, it becomes really hard because you're dealing with third party intermediaries. So, as we're moving forward, and today's talk is about what's going new in technology, what's going on in certainly in Kore's world. I talked earlier about, okay, if these things are moving around, there's something we called Core ID. Okay, and Core ID is this ability to tag that individual investor, move information around to the various participants.
Yeah, that's a brand new launch by KoreTalkX, right?
It's brand new. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
Core
we're
ID. We're
proud
so
of that.
excited. We're so excited where it's going. The team had built this out, and suddenly you realize, what's actually transpired, because you realize that the escrow provider, the broker dealer, the payment rail providers, they're all disconnected intermediaries. But you can't have a centralized hub that controls all the data, because then you have a single point of security risk. Wow, I'm going to get your credit card, I'm going to get your information, your social security number, all this data. It doesn't happen that way. I need each party to be able to connect the dots and only have information that they need to do their job and protect those individual investors. So Core ID, in part, really assists with that. Core ID is that one little element that actually is, as a transaction occurs, it kind of leaves behind little breadcrumbs, if I want to use it simplistically. Um,
Okay,
okay, but
I
those
can work with
breadcrumbs,
that.
but they're all connected. They're all connected. So if I've got these intermediaries, and I think of I've got a house of cards, and Core ID is like the glue that's going to keep them together, so that one little piece that breaks, they're still connected. My house of cards is still going to remain standing. But at the same time, that house of cards is is not a central place for all the data capture for all the individuals. That's what I'm trying to say. They're all got their own piece, but we're connected. We're connected.
Yeah, the glue to the card to hold the cards doesn't know
Kind of.
which number is on the card, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And each card has its own numbers, and there's all these things going on. So it's complicated. So how do so we've seen all the friction points as a platform provider, as a technology provider. We see when escrow is too slow. We see when escrow is too manual. We see when managing digital securities on a cap table, um, or an Excel spreadsheet, or multiple people in a back room, uh, creates friction. Friction creates costs. If we can lower the costs to all of the to all the intermediaries, we can lower the cost for the issuer. Smaller companies can raise capital. So there's not layers and layers of funds being spent where it's just too costly to do this. Okay.
Hmm.
So when I'm kind of looking at this, we can maybe dovetail into some examples. If the investor has friction points, and broker dealer has friction points, and bank providers have friction points, how does Core ID solve some of those?
Mm,
Um,
that's tricky. And we're talking about, as we talk about core ID, we have to remember that we're talking about helping individuals as a whole. We help investors, issuers, broker dealers, right? We can the glue that keeps the house of cards together, right?
yeah, so pretty much. So let me give you one of the things that's come to fruition is when you're solving any problem, like say, okay, so we have a marketplace, a technology infrastructure, Core Chain was developed. Core Chain was developed as a blockchain, the first permission blockchain with qualified Reg A offerings by the SEC. So it said, okay, you're following the regulations. It was built around the regulation. It wasn't built outside here and said, oh, by the way, I got to connect the dots for these regulations. Really, really hard to do. So let me share some stories here. And I guess, and they're not really stories. These
Sure.
are companies raising capital, Raf. So
Yeah, that's important.
and
That's important.
so people go, first off, I'm a new issuer. I'm going to raise capital, and why do I care about all this stuff? I just thought it was way easier. Well, I care about it from a compliance perspective, but the need to solve a problem. So we talk about solving the problem through the intermediaries or taking out some of the friction. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of friction. You need redundancy, you need to build it out, but it's getting better and better and better using Core's chain. So now I have the investor themselves. So that investor is making an investment and they go through and they're filling in all this information. And originally I've made my investment and I'm the issuer. And I'll give you an example of, let's say I'm a company that goes, I'm going to raise $75 million on a Reg A offering and I'm a real estate fund and I'm going to do a REIT and I'm going to spend time, energy, resources, marketing to the public and saying, we think we're going to give you 8% dividends, and that's what our target is. It's one example of a company that might be raising capital. And those investors go, hey, I think this is pretty good, guys. I'm going to invest in the REIT, and let's see how you perform. I get my 8%. In fact, 6 months in, 3 months in, I get 12% dividends. Wow, I'm really liking this. I want to reinvest. When they want to reinvest, what's the process they have to go through? So when we're talking to issuers and they go, oh my gosh, I wish there was an easier, better way. Because now that person, I got them excited. I spent all this money marketing. It's hard marketing. It's getting that exposure. I'm executing on my business model. And in this case, they were doing dividends. The investor comes in and they go, I want to reinvest. They're typing in the data. They said, oh my gosh, I got to do this again. I got to put in all this data again. Oh, my computer crashed, dog bark. You know what? I'll do it later. Huge friction point. The number of people that abandon a transaction. We all know what it's like in the e-commerce world. We know that in the marketing world, it takes about 7 touches for a transaction to occur. So I've got you this far. I've got 6 of those touches. You're entering your data and I lost you. Investors frustrated.
Yes. Yeah, we actually have we created the idea of investor fatigue, right, here at KoreConneX. And we try to tackle the investor fatigue with the KoreID, right?
So yeah, so I didn't really, honestly, when you were first doing KoreID, I'm going, okay, where's the problem here? I made my investment. I wasn't even thinking about reinvesting, like in my head. It was our issuers that are telling us, successful companies raising capital. They go, wow, my investors want to reinvest. Then we see companies that were doing things like 50% reinvestment rates. It may be a dividend scenario, or maybe a company hitting milestones and they continue to tell their marketing story. And your shareholders are going, I dipped in my toe and I really like what you're doing. I'm a follower of this. I want to be part of this, whatever segment you're in.
And
whatever it is, whatever emotional connection. It's exciting. So they are the ones that make this easier. So here's the premise. So this is 2023 KoreID, and this is kind of one of the things we're talking about. So KoreID is like my passport to investing online. I invest once, I get a KoreID. My KoreID is on the blockchain, on our permission chain. My KoreID is like my thumbprint in a sense. In a secure manner, I can come and anywhere I see a KoreID badge on a property, I go, oh, I got a KoreID. I can reinvest. It's going to repopulate all that information associated with me in a secure manner. I don't have to have that friction point of re-entering all my data. I can reinvest from my KoreID. So that's going to allow we don't know, the numbers aren't out yet because we're just releasing KoreID. What percentage of those investors, if we take away that friction point, it's like me going shopping online, or it's like me not having a power failure in my house that I suddenly can't do something, you take that away. So we're excited about that, the reinvestment side. So that's really what KoreID is. Okay. KoreID is that ability for that investor to make reinvestments. It's their digital passport, easily, quickly, and compliantly. I mean, at the end of the day, and most importantly, securely. Okay.
Yes,
Um,
securely.
securely. So anybody and any issuers in the core ecosystem, I can do that reinvestment. Now, there's something else that companies we're looking at, and this becomes important to the investors. So if we've got this core chain and we've got this KoreID and we've got this, I'm coming to web properties. We know that the market is going to explode bigger and bigger when it comes to private capital raises. The data is telling us this. It's growing
Yes.
exponentially. Unfortunately, what else happens when that occurs? You get bad guys coming into the game. Hey, I'm going to set up a website. I'm going to do whatever I want to do to try to raise capital. I mean, we've seen it in the ICO world. We've seen it in other areas in space, but here's it's a regulated environment. So from a trust and compliance perspective, you also need the investors and all the participants in a regulated environment to present that trust and compliance. So something else that KoreConneX has done, and we talk about KoreID for the investor side of it, and I'm going to explain a little bit more on how that dovetails into another new thing release that we're coming out with next week. But we also have what we call KoreID Verified. So KoreID Verified is really a certification mark for a variety of different parties. The parties would be like broker dealers. So the KoreID certified means like it's a mark. It's like a DigiCert. When companies see a DigiCert on their website, they know that my information, as far as it's moving here, this site is being compliant as far as um, not disclosing particular information. My email address, for example. Um, um, DigiCerts will be at the end of the day, they're really protecting my privacy, right? That's what a DigiCert's doing. It's protecting my privacy.
Mhm.
It gives me a level of trust. It's data. My data integrity is not being shared. So that's that badge. That's like that certificate. I mean, it's been around for 20 years, but it had to start somewhere. So KoreID Verified is doing the same thing. Remember, we're verifying all of the intermediaries that are in our ecosystem. So imagine, if you will, I've got this badge, I've got this certification mark that an individual investor can say, hey, wait a sec, this is a FINRA registered broker dealer. That broker dealer, I can look them up and I can see that they're in the central registration. They're in good standing with FINRA. Here, you got a regulatory body. So we're bringing all these regulatory bodies together. Um, uh, broker dealers are one side. The issuer themselves, it gives that level of trust to that investor. You're taking one step away. That all of the participants in this raise are not only compliant, they're part of this regulatory infrastructure. So bad actors that might be, let's be honest, bad actors are going to do things.
Mhm.
Okay. You're going to say, hey, you're going to feign I'm a broker dealer. You're going to feign this. And I hate to say it. So you need that level of trust and compliance. So this
Mhm.
is something else that we're bringing out. It's KoreID Verified. It's for all the participants, from the issuer to the broker dealers, to the legal community, to say, hey, I'm certified. I'm following my own regulatory guidelines with in my community, in the case of like FINRA and the broker dealers, but I'm also interconnected with all these other intermediaries. So the issuer can place this on their site. Broker dealers can utilize it. So this is just an evolution of, again, using not only
Yeah,
just using.
and the investor
Go
can
ahead.
be sure that that offering is real. The company is there. It's all compliant with SEC, with FINRA, with right. We know that the offering is real.
Exactly. Because let's be honest, how much I don't want to go to all these different places to say, is this piece good? Is this
Exactly.
piece good? So consolidate that from a with a verified core ID mark, and that's where that comes in. So we got core ID for the issuer, we've got core ID verified for all the intermediaries, or the investor core ID is what I should say.
Yes.
And so that's something new that we're doing this year. It's all about trust and compliance. We always emphasize at Core that we take no fees from any of these intermediaries. It allows us to be extremely agnostic and stay in our lane. Our lane is the technology provider. Our lane is to facilitate capital raises, optimizing and maximizing the exemptions, and lower costs for the issuers, as odd as that sounds. It's for the long game. It's not for this. It's not transaction based. And this is what the Jobs Act was all about. If you're going to democratize capital, don't take out one leg of the chair and have it all crumble, so to speak. And trust and compliance is necessary for that. So those are some of the
like Oscar always says that David Wields has said it, that private companies are responsible for generating innovation, right? Innovation and jobs, and that's where innovation really lies, right? In private capital. Public traded companies are after profit. It's fair, okay.
It's fair, and we want that. But now, when you're looking at private companies, and I'm glad you brought that up. When you look at, I get the question often goes, what's the best sector? Is it real estate? Is it med tech? Is it this? The beauty of democratizing capital, the beauty of the ability for private companies to raise capital is it doesn't matter what sector you're in. You have an audience. I've said this before in talks that I go, my daughter, she's a biomedical engineering student, and she's 21 years old and has a real global view when it comes to ESG, the environment, causes, different things. She hears different companies do their pitches, or different companies doing their raises, or they're looking at using the exemptions and regulations to raise capital. And one of the comments she will say is, hey, I would invest in that. And I go, why? And she goes, I like what they're doing. That was before. Here's my upside, from a public company. Look, I invest in public company. I'm just going, when is it going up? The emotional connection isn't necessarily the same thing. So different people invest for different reasons. I said the real estate guys, look, I'm getting my dividends. It's an asset that in a private company that I'm getting a return. I've got some immediacy. Somebody else is in an ESG. Somebody else might go, in the med tech space, this is a long journey. Remember I said about reinvesting? If I can take the friction to reinvesting, and I'm following this med tech space, and I'm seeing they're going through, initial trials, and they're going towards FDA approval, they're hitting milestones. Their company is gaining in value. I want to reinvest. How do I take that friction away? You take it away with Core ID. That's the whole beauty of this. I mean, that's why it was so exciting, because it was driven by companies that are successful at their capital raises today saying, make it easier for my firm's people to reinvest. And so many of these companies today that haven't even started aren't thinking about reinvestment. They're worried about that first investor. But you're raising capital in multiple tranches. Even if you think that I'm never going to need money before I've been an entrepreneur and failed entrepreneur and know enough that things happen. COVID happened. Lots of business didn't need money before COVID hit. They sure needed money to weather the storm when it did hit. So you're always raising capital, as far as you want to grow. And this is just simply one more vehicle. It's not the panacea for capital raises. You use multiple different areas, or multiple different opportunities to raise capital, because that's what it is. The regulations provide an opportunity for companies to raise capital. So Core ID is addressing this. Then we got this other new thing coming out.
The big thing for it's already on the app stores, right? But the official launch is next Monday, I believe. But it's already on the KoreID Mobile App.
KoreID Mobile App. So take it to the next step. So we're actually using the beauty of me that's exciting is we're using our core blockchain, core chain, for actual functional purposes. It's not just think to make something up out of thin air and say this chain is going to do this. We're utilizing it to connect all these intermediaries, and there's so many possibilities for it, Raf. That's kind of exciting to us. So, the mobile app, for example, now, and the reason I bring up chain and blockchain and etc. is now I've got this mobile app that the individual investor can download. We always had the ability for me to reinvest. There you go. Let me see that. Let me see your core app.
Yeah, it's
So there it is. You got core ID. So what does that really mean? Okay, I've got this unique identifier. I've already invested in your company. I have this unique ID. It's on my phone. Mobile phone engagement is 7 times higher than my email. That's public knowledge. So if I get a message on my email, for example, I have a higher open rate. Simple as that. Okay. So I download this app, and the reason the app was made again was demand from companies that were doing multiple raises. They said, "Hey, KoreConnex and team, we've got a big audience. We've got 50,000 investors. We're going to do multiple raises." Multiple raises, for example, might be motion picture company that's doing multiple films. They have a fan base. They have a brand advocate base. They have a community at the end of the day.
Yes.
They said, "I like what you're doing. I want to invest in the other one. I got to fill all my forms again on my online." No, have a core ID. We're gonna fill those forms in for you. Now take it to the next step. I spend far more this individuals, consumers, we spend more time on this now than we spend on the computer.
Yes.
So I've got my
at least here in Brazil, the number of mobile phones in houses is like more than the actual population in Brazil. There are more mobile phones here than people.
I believe it. I mean, unfortunately, I look at my phone bill. Everybody in my household, like, "Oh, geez, I got 3 kids. You just pay for cell phone bill." I mean, yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly.
So now I've got my phone app and those reoccurring investments. So, okay, I've got it on my phone, but I've only invested in one company. I invested in your company, but that company is constantly updating information. The problem with company and communication traditionally, let's look at the historicals. You go, I invested in a private company and I've got my share certificate sitting in my filing cabinet. I never heard from them for 10 years. Log on to the computer, try to pick up the phone. If I can re-engage, good news or bad news, with my shareholder community, with my brand advocate, and a lot of companies, I mean, I've talked to guys, they said, "Oh, we don't even call them shareholders. They're not shareholders. They happen to be, they're like my family, or they happen to be owners." There's a racehorse company I was talking to, and they syndicate racehorses, and they do fractionalized ownerships of horses, and they do tens of thousands of transactions pretty much daily. And in that particular instance, people are buying and selling pieces of horses. They're communicating with their brand advocates, in their case, their owners, all the time. Now they're communicating with the phone. You can push information out to the individuals to say, here's an update. Oh, I got an update. Oh, this is doing really well. Whether it's my REIT, whether it's my home, whether it's a milestone, whether it's a real estate company, put a shovel in the ground. They're progressing. Make it easy for me to see the information. Now make it even easier for me to reinvest in your company. So not only does the phone app allow the investor to make easy reinvestments, but they're alerted to updates that the company has. So KoreID is this really closed loop communications tool, as well as a secure way for me to make an investment and reinvest. So it's just like I say, it's just early, and that's just the new package that we're bringing out. So that's kind of, I guess, what we're here to talk about today, was to say, okay, you got KoreID, KoreID Verified is certification.
You mentioned film producing companies with multiple launches. If we had launched KoreID before, Iron Man wouldn't have to be killed, right? In the Avengers, we could still have Iron Man there.
but true stories, just from a common sense perspective, you think, look, it's hard marketing, it's hard, to create the awareness, it's hard to share your information, but you spend all that time and energy doing it. Your best customer is the one you're already engaged with. The
Or
better job you do with communicating with that customer allows, I mean, it doesn't allow them, they're just more comfortable sharing that story with someone else. So when we talk about offline viral is two people sitting, having a cup of coffee and having a conversation and going, hey, you know what? I just invested in this company. Oh, really? Show me, what does that look like?
how? Yeah.
This is how it looks like. It looks like this. Look at my shares. Look at this is what I'm doing. Here's the company. So we're the first company that I'm aware of. We never that actually took the approach that we took to have a mobile app that unifies the shareholders and gives the ability for all the issuers to push out information. So it's just super, super exciting.
Yeah, we
So
have
we've
we have
got
communication, we have investments, we have trust, we have compliance, we have permission-based blockchain, which the information is not there all the time. You have to allow the parts involved to get the information. So it really the core ID environment really connects itself to deliver a very good experience to all the individuals involved, right? The issuers, individual investors, broker dealers, escrow providers. I mean, it's all
yeah,
there.
and it's just the start of it, right? I mean, it's we know that the market is early stage, the market is growing, um, but we also know that there's lots of these friction points. So again, trust and compliance. 2023, you're going to see a lot of great success stories in the private capital markets. You're going to see horror stories too. So part of our job is to, you know, there is no gray. The regulations exist for a reason. Um, whether I like them or not, by the way, Raf, like I
Yeah,
might,
no, it's about
that's
complying, not
that,
about right.
yeah, it's about complying. And too many companies, I think, historically they're all doing it over there. Well, they're doing this. It must be okay. They're doing this. It might be, okay. We look at the FTX side of things. Why can't we
Hmm.
do this? I hear this word, if it drives me crazy one more time, and people go, let's just tokenize it. And then we have this opportunity. And I'm going, wow, like tokenize it doesn't give you anything. Tokenizing just breaks it down into pieces. You've put it on this immutable ledger, but now you have to transact with it. How do you transact with it? All these intermediaries I just discussed allow you to transact. So breaking it down into small pieces doesn't allow you to do something if you're not following the regulations and the guidelines. And it's hard. I mean, every day we have to update it and build redundancy as a tech company. Um, so anyway, we'll close on Core ID, um, Core ID Verified, Core ID Mobile App.
Which is already on the stores, App Store or
Yeah,
iOS.
most of our summits aren't a big commercial like this one is. It's not meant to be a commercial. I think we're just real passionate
Yeah,
about saying,
yeah,
hey,
exactly.
it's a passport for online investing. The market's growing. If we can take out the the friction points, and really listen to both the investors. This was for the investor.
Yeah, and
The
I
other
believe this is
really
the first
interesting,
content. This is the first content we put out that puts together all the ideas. Core ID, the Core ID Verified, and the mobile app. Right. This is the first time we connect them. Right.
well, there was no, you're right. There was something else that I didn't realize until I was playing with it the other day. So broker dealers have a job to do. So broker dealer is doing the final. Remember, we talked about KYC.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the
Yes.
mistakes that happen when an investor makes an investment is I didn't enter I hit a 9 versus an 8. I didn't hit my proper information in. So I'm not going to pass my KYC. Something else that I realized on my phone when I was doing that, log into my account because I do a lot of demos, and I'll go, oh, you entered in dummy data. So my core ID, it pops up to me, Peter, you need to pass, for you to do your KYC, you need to change some data. You need to correct your data. It now gave me the ability to actually help the broker dealer, which is going to help the issuer,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to streamline the efficiencies of that transaction.
reducing time, reducing costs,
Reduce
increasing
time and
efficiency.
cost. That's the whole point. This isn't some esoteric, why are we doing this? And maybe they will come. This is taking away friction points. It's real. And if it's real to take away friction points, the costs come down. More companies can participate. So anyway, that's kind of where we're going to end today, I think, Raf. And
That's wonderful. That was great. It was great. It was the first time that I myself thought about all these items together. It's interesting to see from this perspective.
it forced me to really think of how it all gets to connected. And I think
Yes.
when Dr. Krangarmala and Oscar, and they're putting this together, and I remember, over a year ago, they're going, we're doing this KoreID, and we're doing this mobile app. I couldn't get my head around. I'm going, I was, you didn't have the vision until you saw the problems that it was solving for actual customers, until the customers said, why don't you do this? So they were ahead of the game. We're always trying to listen, and we're always open to new ideas, always open to, see where we can go with this. So
sure. So I believe we can wrap it up, Peter. It was great. I mean, we work together, of course, but we hardly ever have time to spend a whole hour talking about solutions. So a lot of ideas will still come up, and of course, KoreID Verified, and the mobile app are just the beginning of it, right? The best is yet to come. I do believe that. That was very exciting to see, put in perspective everything we have been doing, and we are always here, right, Peter, for clients, for customers, for partners, whoever wants to get in touch with us. We are on LinkedIn. You can email us. You can log into the KoreConnect website. We're available. We're here, and that's it. That's it. If you want to leave your final goodbyes.
Great weekend to all, and to those in the U.S., happy holiday on Monday. Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.